All right, welcome back, everybody. What's going on? Got an early one for you. Eric and I both had our opinions on it, and I know a lot of other people had their opinions on it, and other people have commented on it as well. So I'm going to talk about it a little bit more, and I'm going to kind of give my opinion on it and kind of add on to what we talked about yesterday on the Ringside Reporter podcast. So Teddy Atlas, as we all know, now he's got his own little YouTube thing with Ken Rideout, and they do their own little their own little show now. Now he's active on social media as well. He's on Twitter. I guess his kids or his daughter or someone helps him run his Twitter account because he's not very computer savvy or whatever. So now he's trying to basically be a voice on social media. We've seen it, we've heard it, we've listened to him on YouTube, and we've read his tweets. So a recent tweet that he came out with was basically criticizing the Showtime card that just took place on Saturday. And he was big up in the UFC card, saying boxing needs to learn and take a page out of UFC's book. So, we've seen this recently from Teddy, and more he seems to be doing this as time goes on in recent weeks, recent months, whatever. So we've seen this. And it seems kind of the timing is kind of convenient because when Teddy was working regularly, when he was a commentator, when he had regular work on ESPN, he never really talked like this. He may have criticized boxing here and there, but he's never gone on this mission, so to speak, about going out of his way to really trash boxing, really, and in the process, big upping UFC, in the pro, as well at the same time. So he's trashing boxing and big up in UFC at the same time. So he's kind of caping really hard recently for the UFC, and he never did that before. And again, he wasn't. It all stems back to him, to me, getting canned by ESPN. I know they kept him on. They let him do. He's kind of like a contributor now, whatever. Every now and then they put him on camera when there's a big fight. They get his take on it. But let's make no mistake about it. This was a demotion. Okay. I've never been a huge fan of Teddy Atlas. To each his own. Everyone has a right to their own opinion. Everyone has a right to like what they like. Anyone can criticize anyone. And Teddy has the right, and he's well within his right to criticize boxing and praise the UFC if he wants. But you have to question his reason, his motives now, because again, Teddy seems like a bitter guy. He's very open and talking about how he has a love-hate relationship with boxing. A lot of his relationships in the sport of boxing, they dissolved. Whether it was his fault or the fighter's fault or the whoever he was dealing with, network, whatever. He had issues with Mike Tyson, as we all know. And he was kicked out of that camp. He was with Michael Moore for a little while, kicked out of that camp. Donnie Lalonde got fired right before the biggest fight of Donnie Lalonde's career against Sugar Ray Leonard. So, Teddy's never really had a long-standing relationship with anyone. Now, for a little while, he had it with Mike Tyson. That was probably his longest relationship, but eventually that dissolved too. But ever since after that, all his relationships with fighters dissolved very quickly. So, he's a little bit bitter about that. In his book, he was so mad at Donnie Lalonde for firing him right before Donnie Lalonde's biggest fight of his career that he actually said he went to his house with a gun, and if Donnie Lalonde was there, he said it's quite possible that he may have shot him. Who knows if that's just hyperbole or whatever. Who knows what that is? Teddy likes to sensationalize everything. To me, Teddy just exaggerates everything. He overstates things, and he just goes out of his way to be over the top on certain things, you know? And this is no different in this situation. Now, that was the UFC card better than the boxing card? Yeah, it was. Does UFC consistently put out better cards than boxing as a whole? Yeah. But they don't always, they have their bad cards just like anyone else. And I got to give Dana White and the UFC full credit. During this pandemic, they put on great shows. They put on some good cards from top to bottom, but a lot of their cards are pay-per-view, whereas boxing has a lot more free shows. Now, boxing is on probably more frequently. Boxing has more platforms because we know how UFC's run. It's like one entity. Dana White calls the shots. You don't take the fights, you get shelved. Where boxing fighters have opportunities to, a lot of fighters are free agents. They can shop around. They can go to different promoters. And different promoters have different deals with different networks. So we see boxers have more options. It's less rigid in the boxing world as opposed to UFC. UFC, there's one entity. You got one guy running the show, one guy calling the shots. So of course, the structure over there is going to be a lot different. And as a result, you do get better fights on a more consistent basis. But when boxing does put on their super fights, nothing can compare to a boxing mega event, which usually we get 2 or 3 of them a year. And they always outperform the UFC events more often than not. And history has shown that the highest grossing combat sports events of all time have always been boxing. So we know that. So was the UFC card better than the Showtime card this past Saturday? Yeah, I think it's fair to say that. But again, was that Showtime card really trash? I thought it was a solid card. That's my opinion. You can disagree if you want. That's fine. You had Lubin, you had Erickson Lubin versus Terrell Gausha, 2 top junior middleweight contenders. Winner was going to put themselves in line for a title shot. It was a big, significant fight. I thought the other fights on the card were good too. I thought they were entertaining. I enjoyed the card. Now, full disclosure, I do buy UFC pay-per-views and I do watch UFC occasionally, but I'm a casual UFC fan. So I am biased towards boxing. No, there's no question about it. I prefer boxing over UFC. No question about it. But I will support UFC and I will buy the big events. I will. I have no problem doing that. And when UFC does do a great job, and when Dana White does a good job, which he's done a phenomenal job throughout this pandemic, I don't think anyone's outperformed Dana White. I have to be honest. But Teddy seems like he's going out of his way to really shit on boxing recently. And obviously he was always critical of the sport. I'm not going to sit there and say that this is all of a sudden he's criticizing the sport of boxing, but he never went this hard against boxing, and he never went out of his way this hard to big up and cape for the UFC. So you have to ask yourself why. And I think a lot of that has to do with his bitterness over the years of just having bad relationships with fighters and continuously getting fired. I think that left a bad taste in his mouth. And recently, after being with ESPN for a long time, I think he was with ESPN for almost 12, 15 years. And then they fired him. So, he's been really, I think he's real salty as of late. He's getting older. He seems to me to be a cantankerous old man. And a lot of that has stemmed through in my opinion, his bad relationships over the years with people in the business. And most recently, him getting fired from ESPN. So to sit there and go out of your way to really shit on boxing and big up UFC, I don't know. He has a right to do that if he wants, but you have to ask yourself why, and is he really being totally 100% fully objective? Again, boxing has a way of shooting itself in the foot. It's hard to defend boxing in a lot of situations, in a lot of instances. We know this. It's fine. But Teddy's going really hard on boxing, really hard. Like he's really going out of his way to shit on the sport. And if you notice, Teddy hasn't been on camera in a long time on television. He hasn't been on ESPN for a long time. Obviously, the pandemic is having an effect on that. But let's see what happens. Let's see what happens when there is a big fight. If they do call him into the studio, if they do ask for his input. Let's see what happens, because it seems as time goes on, they've really diminished his role over there, and I'm sure he's not happy about it. He can't be happy about it. There's no way he's going to be happy about it. So I think that has a lot to do with his recent criticism of the sport and him going out of his way to really praise UFC and Dana White. And by him doing this, like he's doing it constantly, it's like almost every week or every couple weeks, he's making a statement about how boxing's cards have been horrible and UFC's cards have been awesome. So what's the motive there? Then Ray Flores, who's a commentator for Fox, ring announcer, he retweeted Teddy's tweet by him, trashing the Showtime card and praising the UFC card, saying it was 1,000 times better or whatever. I'm paraphrasing a little bit here. And he said the same thing I'm saying. And actually, I'm agreeing with Ray Flores. We're both in agreement here that Teddy is salty because he's no longer in the business, really. He's got no vested interest in the business. So it's hard to not say or believe or suspect that there's a little bit of saltiness there on Teddy's part. It's really hard to not see that or not question that, to say if that's the case. And if you think the Showtime card was trash, that's your opinion. If you think UFC is killing boxing, that's fine too. I will say that UFC right now is, in terms of quality, I think they are putting on better shows more consistently. There's no question about that in my mind. But boxing still puts on good cards. When there's a big fight in boxing, when there's a mega fight in boxing, okay, I don't think there's anything in the world that can compare to it. The buzz that's around it, like if Tyson Fury fights Anthony Joshua, which is very, very possible, could happen next year. There's nothing that's going to compare to that. Nothing can touch that. Nothing. Possibly, maybe the World Cup and the Super Bowl. But outside of that, nothing. No other combat sport can touch that. Boxing. When you took Mayweather versus Pacquiao, that's one event. Mayweather versus McGregor, another event. I don't think anything could touch that. Any event, any one-time event could touch that. I don't think there's anything UFC can or will produce that will ever touch, Mayweather Pacquiao or Mayweather McGregor. I just don't. So at the end of the day, when boxing is at its best, in my opinion, I don't think there's anything that can touch it outside of the World Cup and the Super Bowl. And again, you have to look at the World Cup. World Cup is a series of games. It's not just one game. So if you look at just a one-time event, like a Mayweather Pacquiao or a Mayweather McGregor, and then you take McGregor, who's an MMA fighter, In order for him to make the biggest payday of his career, he had to cross over and step into boxing. So Teddy has to understand that, and I'm sure he does, that nothing can touch this sport of boxing when it's at its best, in my opinion. They just can't. So I think Teddy Atlas is salty. I think he's kind of overstating things a little bit here. I think he's going over the top. I think he's really going out of his way as of late to shit on the sport of boxing. I don't think it does the sport of boxing or himself any good. I don't see what the what the benefit is for him to come out and say this. And then, oh, well, I speak my mind. I'm not afraid to say what I want to say. Okay, but you have to ask yourself, when you do say something, when you do speak your mind, what are the repercussions going to be? What are you actually looking to gain by going out of your way to speak your mind and saying something negative towards something or someone? An old saying that I live and die by. The old saying that I live and die by. You can't subtract from others to add to yourself. So what positive message could be taken away from Teddy Atlas constantly shitting on the sport of boxing? It's definitely sour grapes, and you have to say to yourself, this is a guy that's made millions of dollars over the course of his life from this sport. So there should be some type of gratitude that he has for the sport of boxing. He should be thankful for what the sport of boxing has provided him instead of shitting on it constantly. So one thing being critical of it, but like I said, he goes above and beyond out of his way to shit on the sport. And as time goes on, he becomes more bitter, more salty, more cantankerous over the years. He's really turning into an old, cranky, disgruntled man. Sounds like a disgruntled employee right now because he got fired from ESPN. And everyone, like when you look at all of the fighters he's trained, right? And he's never even trained Mike Tyson as a professional. He got fired before Mike Tyson turned pro. Look at all the fighters he's trained over the years. Okay? His relationships never last more than 2 or 3 fights. Why is that? Why do people keep firing him? Now, he had a good gig with ESPN. We can't take that away from him. But as soon as ESPN really started trying to focus on boxing again, and he tried to bring his antics back into the fray, why do you think he got fired again? Like when they started really trying to go mainstream with boxing, when they started to really step up their game over there, when they really tried to attract more viewers, and when they really started working with Bob Arum and Top Rank recently, I know they did many years back in the 80s and 90s. They were working with Top Rank when they Top Rank was really vested, and ESPN they were really vested in each other, and then they kind of got away from that after a while, and then they started putting on those low-level fights on those the ESPN Friday night fights or whatever. But once they started stepping up their game again, and they really tried to go in a different direction with putting on the big money fight, putting on the big time fights, and really start showcasing on fighters like Lomachenko, Terrence Crawford, Tyson Fury, when they really started to up their game again, they weren't going to deal with Teddy's antics, his over-the-top bullshit, his grandstanding, his constant grandstanding. ESPN wanted to make it about the fighters. They didn't want to make it about Teddy Atlas. It's not about you. So once they started going in that direction, what did they do? They got rid of him. We don't need this. And the way he behaved on air, that interview with Jeff Horn, was disgraceful. The way he talked about Mark Kriegel, who I'm not a huge fan of, but he's got his strengths and weaknesses, and but to sit there and trash a colleague on air like that, it's totally unprofessional. So ESPN said, you know what? Enough of this. Enough of this. We're trying to go mainstream here, and we're not going to be able to cross over with this guy. See you later. See you later. So this whole thing about, speaking my mind, saying what I want to say, okay, you could do that, but there's going to be repercussions to go with that. And if there's not going to be anything to benefit of you speaking your mind, then sometimes, like your mom and dad said to you, you don't have nothing nice to say, then don't say it at all. What good comes out of constantly trashing the sport of boxing week after week and thinking you're going to make it better by constantly trashing it? How are you going to attract new viewers to the sport? If this is a sport you supposedly love, how are you going to make it better by constantly going out of your way to shit on it? And what benefit do you have by constantly saying, oh, UFC is killing boxing, UFC is killing boxing? Once again, you come off as being salty and ungrateful to a sport that has given you great wealth and has put you in a great position over the years. But you should be way more thankful to the sport of boxing for what it's done for you. And you're so fortunate to be able to have a job like you had. You're not sitting there, working in a factory or busting your ass all day. You're doing something that's fun. You're in a gym working with guys. You're on television talking and having and being an analyst and being a commentator. How many people would die for that job? And you're not appreciative and grateful? You're not appreciative and grateful for that? So, again, I have my opinions on it. You guys may have your opinions on it. Let me know what you think. Is Teddy Atlas being salty here? Is his criticism really needed to the extent that he's giving it? Is his criticism fair? Is he going too hard on the sport of boxing? And what good is going to come out of it in the end by him constantly shitting on the sport that he supposedly loves? Doesn't sound like he loves it right now. All right, guys. Beeb is out. Talk to y'all soon. Have a great day. Take care. And peace out, Brave.